What's up, guys? I just watched Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. My expectations going into this movie, I was expecting it to be fucking balls in the good way. Not saggy, sweaty, disgusting, smelly balls. Like the balls it takes to ride on the side of an airplane, or the balls it takes to learn to fly a helicopter and learn one of the most difficult moves there is when it comes to helicoptering. And I don't know, there's something about this movie because Fallout is my favorite Mission Impossible movie, mainly because of the movie going experience I had. It was similar to this experience I had with Dead Reckoning Part 1, where there's a limited amount of people in the movie theater because I go during the day, the matinee. In Fallout and Hereditary are two movies where the setup of how things are, whether it's like an action scene or like a suspense scene, how the setup and build up leads to the essential climax. Those two movies kind of like made it click in my head how to kind of construct scenes like that. So I was expecting to see more of that in this movie, because not that there wasn't any of it in this movie. It's just, I don't know, I'm biased towards that movie going experience with Fallout because that's like the first time where I was like, there's only one scene in this movie that made me feel like that, which is the train sequence, which was fucking awesome because they have to go from train car to train car, and the first train car is the fucking kitchen train car, and it's leaking all these fluids, and then like the greases and shit, so it's all slippery, and then the flame turns on, and then the fucking gas line breaks, and then you're like, ugh, and then they go to the next car, and it's really good at, I don't know, I just feel like it didn't linger on those moments long enough. I don't feel like it lingered in the suspense long enough. Like it did a good job of, I'm specifically talking about the action scenes. It did a good job of the plotting of the action scene, but I felt like they didn't let us live in the suspense as much as I would have liked, which maybe this is the case for the other Mission Impossible movies, but I can't really recall any of them like by head. I haven't watched them in a minute. I didn't watch any of the movies going into this. But yeah, because essentially in the screenwriter's Bible, they talk about plot for action movies, and one of the best ways to look at plot in an action movie is each situation should be good news, bad news, good news, bad news. For example, dude stuck on a runaway plane is about to fly in the mountain, bad news. Good news, he has a parachute. Bad news, he jumps out, deploys it, the cord breaks. Good news, he has a backup chute. That's essentially how you want to plot your action scenes. Good news, bad news, good news, bad news. And it does a really good job of doing that. There's certain points in this movie, I understand action movies there has to be a MacGuffin, specifically Mission Impossible movies. There has to be a MacGuffin, and there has to be a lot of exposition to make us understand the danger of the MacGuffin. And there was so much of that it kind of, I feel like it fucked the pacing up. Maybe it's the same case with Mission Impossible Fallout, because I did experience moments of boredom with that. But it does a really good job of keeping Ethan Hunt human. He's not just some super badass that can do everything and anything. He exhibits fear. Like, there's only one moment in this movie where he exhibits fear out of like actually doing something, which is when he has to ride his bike off the cliff and then fucking parachute or whatever. But he's always exhibiting fear for his friends, like having them in harm's way and not being able to do anything about that, which is, I'm pretty sure that's a running theme through every movie. The fear of loss. Yeah, I don't think that's anything new to this. And it does it, the midpoint. I'm gonna be all over the place. I'm sorry. I don't write like fucking scripts for this. I just go off the dome. The midpoint, I feel like there wasn't necessarily maybe there in the action movies, specifically the Mission Impossible movies, maybe there is no midpoint where there's supposed to be like a high and everything is like good. Because there was no high. I don't, from what I remember, there, or at least it didn't feel like there was a high moment before a downfall crash. Because Ilsa dies, which is good because she's been in a fuck ton of the movies. Because it made sense story wise. Because they're like, well, I don't know. Because they make it seem like, oh, this new character could die, or Elsa could die. And it's like, well, obviously she has to die because it would make no sense because we have no history with this new character. So maybe if they juxtapose that with a character that's already established, maybe it would have had more weight. Not to say it didn't have weight. It did have weight when Elsa died. And it obviously affected Ethan. And it did do a... They do let that live. It's not just something where they just move on to the next thing. They let it live and they sink in. And what I do like about the movie is how they have like the way they introduce like imagining the future, imagining the future events of what could happen or how things might turn out. I think that's pretty cool how they do that. Or just like the little flashes of memory whenever, like for example, when Ethan's about to do the jump and he's like, what am I doing this for? And then it flashes like Ilsa and his friends and all. It's really cool. And on top of that, this movie has stellar sound design. The sound design is so fucking good, especially when they're on the train and they go through the tunnel. It's fucking awesome. It's fucking badass. Of course, the stunts are great. When they were doing everything in Rome, I'm like, how the fuck did they film this? Like, how much of this did they block off? How did the fuck, like, yeah. It has interesting locations, too. I don't think a Mission Impossible movie has ever been to Rome. I don't think. I could be mistaken with a lot of the things that I'm saying. What else? It has a fucking awesome score, too. I feel like maybe the score is probably a little bit overused, because they use the theme a lot, obviously. But they try to make the theme dynamic in terms of the situation or the predicament or whatever is happening on screen. Like when Ilsa dies, they have the Mission Impossible score, but it's a little bit more somber, which is nice. But I feel like they overused it. I feel like maybe that's the case in the other Mission Impossible movies too. I don't know. The score was good though, nonetheless. Oh, dude, the cinematography, the staging and the blocking is fucking masterful. How they always have the most important thing in focus, or like how the characters move around the scene and how the camera moves through the scene, and like it's so well done. It's so cool. It feels like each frame I noticed it mainly in the first act. It feels like each frame is indicative of each person's character or their intent. I think what I'm talking about, the staging and blocking, is most prevalent in the opening scene when you know that either Ilsa or Ethan is in the mask and they're just sitting in the back, and the way they frame that, how sometimes he's in the shot but he's like blurred out, or like it's so good. It's so good. I noticed it less throughout the rest of the movie, but it was still there for sure. Maybe because I was focused on other things. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's a pretty good movie. I don't know if it's my favorite Mission Impossible movie, but then again, I haven't seen all of them in a minute, so I can't say whether or not where it ranks necessarily in my Mission Impossible favorites list, but it's definitely worth a watch for sure. There's some clinchers, there's some nail biters, especially the whole end train sequence. There's not anything that is, because usually when you hear about like stunts for a Mission Impossible movie, there's always like one crazy stunt, or it feels like for Fallout there was like a couple, because like he halo dives in that one. He learns the helicopter thing, and then he's hanging on to like the crate thing at the bottom of the helicopter. So those ones stick out in my head. I feel like there was less of that in this movie, which was kind of disappointing because that's like the main thing. But I'm also probably biased to this. Maybe there are some Maybe I'd have to watch like the background, like the how this movie was made to really appreciate the things that went into it in terms of the stunts and stuff. Um, but yeah, it's a pretty good movie. I would recommend you go watch it. Anyways, I feel like that's all I have to say. But yeah, let me know what you think, I guess.